We all know that the most important tool in tennis, after the players themselves, is the racket, right? But do you know how rackets first came to be? How do players choose their perfect rackets? And how can you pick the ideal one for yourself? From its origins to its modern evolution, the tennis racket has undergone incredible changes. Join us in this video as we dive deep into everything you need to know about this indispensable piece of equipment. And before we begin, don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on our latest tennis insights. Let's get started. Tennis is one of the most popular sports in the world and is gaining more and more fans. It became an official sport about 40 years ago, but it had already been played for a long time. Since its inception, the sport has undergone some improvements, including its main piece of equipment, the tennis racket. To give you an idea, tennis was once played with the hands, and the players of the time had no idea that rackets, as we see today, would be used during matches. So, let's delve a little deeper into the history and tell you a little about the evolution of tennis rackets and how these advances were fundamental for the sport to become one of the favorites worldwide. When did the first tennis racket appear? In some historical data, it is possible to read reports that tennis began to be played in Egypt and in some European countries in the 5th century. Of course, the game had a different format and was not standardized as it is today, but regardless of the place where it was played, there was no tennis racket. The game model seen today only began to take shape in the 12th century. However, hands were still used. During this period, players played against the wall, but over time the format was modified, with the use of rectangular courts and objects that served as rackets to protect the hands from impacts. But it was only in the 15th century that the first sketch of what would later be considered a tennis racket appeared. It was made of carved wood, with a handle and an oval head. This was the starting point for the creation and evolution of tennis rackets, as players found physical relief during games and realized that this equipment was necessary for the game. The support of this racket led to the expansion of the game among the number of players at the time who saw that it was possible to play the sport. A brief summary of the history of tennis. Before presenting the evolution of tennis rackets over the centuries, it is important to show some historical data about tennis so that we can understand, chronologically, the evolution of rackets. As we have seen, tennis has undergone some changes throughout its history. The sport was almost abolished after the Napoleonic War, with many courts being destroyed, but in the 19th century, it came back with a vengeance. The oldest tennis tournament in the world is Wimbledon, held for the first time in 1877 in London. It was essential for the rules to begin to be standardized, with the first official record in 1881 by the United States National Lawn Tennis. In 1924, the International Tennis Federation added some more rules to the game. From then on, the sport underwent yet another evolution, later being included in the Olympic Games and spread throughout the world. Why is this information important when it comes to the evolution of rackets? Understanding a little about the history of tennis and then reading about its evolution over the centuries helps us better understand the real importance of the racket for the dissemination of the sport, in addition to the creation and updating of rules based on the use of equipment. We have a complete article about the history of tennis. Take the opportunity to learn more about the sport. Evolution of tennis rackets over the centuries. Knowing the importance that tennis rackets had in the history of the sport, it is time to learn, in chronological order, about the evolution of the main tennis equipment. C. 15th century. Emergence of the first model of tennis racket. Also known as battoir, it can be said that the first tennis racket appeared in the 15th century, as shown. It was made entirely of wood and was shaped to meet the style of play of the time, which consisted of simply hitting the ball. The shape varied, and there was no standard, although many had an oval head. 16th century. Improvement of the battoir. The improvement took place in the 16th century, and some historians give credit to the Italians. The main modification was the stringing of tennis rackets, which had both ends connected by handles made of sheep intestines. The stringing was done diagonally, and the racket was still made of wood, measuring approximately 150 centimeters in length. 18th and 19th centuries, modernization of rackets. Due to advances in technology, standardization of rules, and also the officialization of court tennis among the Olympic sports. During this period, a new evolution of tennis rackets took place. In 1957, René Lacoste created some metal models, which were later released by the Wilson brand, which bought the rights and included in its catalog the T2000, a metal racket unlike anything that had ever been seen before. Graphite rackets, a material still used today, appeared in the mid-1980s after experts tested and discovered that graphite was more flexible than metal rackets. They were lighter, and John McEnroe and Steffi Graf were probably the first to use this model. 21st century, use of technologies. The 21st century was marked by the arrival of new technologies that provide comfort, precision during strokes, and also greater safety for players. Furthermore, these new technologies have led to the creation of different rackets that are suited to each level of player. Just as the creation of the racket allowed more people to play the sport, the arrival of these technologies can also be seen as a milestone in the inclusion of players of all levels. Let's understand better by getting to know its characteristics. Carbon fiber rackets. Carbon fiber is made of foldable carbon sheets placed in a hexagonal shape and is produced through heat that, depending on the intensity, is capable of presenting four different forms, namely standard modulus, SM, intermediate modulus, IM, high modulus, HM, and ultra-high modulus, UHM. Graphene rackets. An important fact about graphene is that although it is found in nature, it was only discovered in 2004. This material is extracted from graphite, making rackets made of it resistant and light. What is the best tennis racket? There is no denying that tennis rackets have undergone a long period of modifications before they reach their current models. But one thing is certain. All this evolution means that players have a large list of options. However, the positive point of this variety is that each type of player can choose the right equipment. Today, it is possible to find rackets for children, beginners, intermediate players, and advanced or professional players. The ideal is to do some research on the brands, identify the materials used, and check whether they are in line with the objectives. As we've seen, the evolution of the tennis racket is nothing short of fascinating, shaping the way the game is played today. Whether you're a beginner or an aspiring pro, understanding the history and technology behind your racket can take your game to the next level.